So, welcome everybody. This is the webinar with Chris Milbank, and I am thrilled, excited, and I can't say anything else. I'm just so happy because I've had the honor and privilege of talking with you before, and I've been using reflective repatterning intensely in everything I do, and I probably only understood this much of it, but I find it such an incredible tool. So we're here to understand, and I think we want to start. Somebody said it would be fantastic to know what it's like, what it is we're talking about before we talk about it. So I'm going to leave everything to you, and we're just going to ride along and be happy. And if somebody wants to ask a question, when we're this many people, it's not going to work, waving your hand or something like that. Just unmute yourself and talk. And if Chris says, I'll take that later, we'll just take it later. But we will have some Q&A time in the end. So if you have a flow, Chris, just go with it.
Sure. Would you like a sort of a short demonstration? Is that what?
Yes, that is exactly what I want. And let me just also tell you that the crowd here we're a Scandinavian crowd with people from the NLP Society, from the from International Hypnotists Guild, from Peaceful Heart Network. We're people from the States, from ASAP Humanitarian Committee and Havening Committee Havening Community. And if you want to ask questions in the chat, that's another way. And the Bay Area, yeah. So you can just write stuff in the chat and we can read it also, and that's probably easier. Having said this, Chris, just be excited and be you.
I'm always excited.
I know.
With my type of life, you've got to be excited.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, reflective repatterning is about taking opposite polarities. And when I say polarities, we might think of two ends of a magnet. We have a north pole and we have a south pole. One pole charges the other charges, so the north charges the south and the south charges the north. And an example of this would be perhaps somebody has an emotional issue with anger. And I would say to them, oh, what's the opposite of anger for you? And they might say it's joy or happiness. And we would find that the more they like the opposite, so joy or happiness, the more they'll hate the anger. And the more they hate the anger, the more they will love the joy or the happiness. So it's no good just working at one end and reducing the anger, because the love for joy and what have you is building and building, and it's charging its opposite. It recharges again. So with reflective repatterning, I've designed lots of left brain logical frameworks to work in a right brain big picture. And I use different tools to apply the frameworks. So some in Havening now work in opposites with sort of ideas from reflective repatterning. Some of us in the original of our work, we use Tapas Fleming's energy hold, where all the acupunctural meridians go into the nervous system and brain at once. So that's thumb and ring finger, just either side the bridge of the nose, middle finger on the forehead, and then the opposite hand horizontally across the back of the head, which links the visual part of the brain. And so all emotion is electrical. It's an energy field. And those that know about EFT and TFT and the tap technique know that what we're doing is breaking down the emotional electrical field, which then changes the way we perceive the mind-body program of the issue. So let's go back to somebody with anger. They will have thoughts and memories of things that made them angry. And by then holding the position and running through with the client variables on opposites what we then do is we start neutralizing the anger. We start treating the resistance to loving the anger. We start treating the resistance to treating the opposite of anger, so to hating joy, and then the excess need for love or joy. And what we're doing is, as we're reducing this intense energy, all the programs begin to change. And just like with NLP, we something more distant or faded, it automatically happens. And what we, in the end, we do is we create more neutrality. And neutrality is not a feel nothing state, but it's a state where, you know, at times it's good to be angry. So it allows you to be angry where it's going to be beneficial to you. But it also gives you the flexibility to be more joyous when something would have normally have upset you and made you angry. So you have the ability to go from the north end to the south end, or from joy to anger, or anywhere in between. That's the idea of reflex repatterning, is to give that freedom, choice and flexibility back to the person that was restricted. Yes.
And could you give an example of how you actually do it in practice?
Yeah. Let's just do that now. Let's take something that I'll give you a couple of choices, and then those that are watching, they might want to join in. Common ones to do that can be quite good is freedom versus trapped, or there's honesty versus dishonesty. Or we could choose an emotional program. It could be security versus insecurity. What one might fit your target audience there?
I think just pick one, because anyone is going to learn, and we'll learn from everything you say. And as soon as we see 3 different ones, we'll find the pattern and generalize it.
Okay, so to do the whole thing will take 20 minutes. So I'll give a 5 to 10 minute example.
Yeah, beautiful.
Okay, so what I want people to do is to take one hand, it could be left or right, and you've got to take your thumb and your ring finger, the ring finger being the one next to your tiny finger. And you're just going to very gently hold either side of the bridge of the nose, and then place the middle finger roughly sort of third eye, middle of the forehead, just like that. The other hand goes across the back of the head. Now, if you're sitting and you have a table in front of you, put your elbows down, or put your elbows on your knees and do it, or you can find a comfortable position if you're on a sofa or a bed while listening. So I'm just going to allow everybody to adjust slightly. And I'm just going to give a shortened version of the experience for you. And I'm going to stand up as I do this. It's because I like to swing my arms around when I'm enjoying the RR. So just focus on a time in your life, or times in your life, where you may have been trapped. These may be your most intense experiences to your earliest memories, and how this has affected you in the past. Think about how trapped may be affecting you in the present. And if it were to be affecting you, how would your future be if trapped kept playing a part where you felt trapped in your life? Just become aware of your breathing. Notice any emotions that you may be feeling, or any tension in your body. Holding that tap position, I want you just to listen to these words. You don't have to say them, just listen. I love being trapped. I love it, I adore it, I really enjoy it. I love to be trapped. I love to be trapped in all sorts of areas of my life. I love it, I adore it, I really enjoy it. I love being trapped. But I hate it, I despise it, I loathe it, I detest it. I hate being trapped. What a horrible, terrible thing. I've been trapped in my life. I've been trapped in relationships. I've been trapped in business. I've been trapped in different areas of my life. And I hate it, I despise it, I loathe it, I detest it. I hate being trapped. But I love to be trapped in a good time. I love to be trapped into having lots of fun and lots of health. I love it, I adore it, I really enjoy it. I love being trapped, but I hate and despise, I loathe and detest being trapped into something I don't want, being trapped with a person that I don't want to be with, being trapped in a career that I really dislike. I hate it, I despise it, I loathe it, I detest it. I hate being trapped. I love being trapped. What a wonderful, fabulous, marvelous thing. What a wonderful, fabulous, marvelous thing. I want to be trapped in the best relationship ever. I want to be trapped on the best continuous holiday that I could possibly ever have. I love it, I adore it, I really enjoy it. I love to be trapped. I hate freedom. I really hate freedom. I hate it, I despise it, I loathe it, I detest it. I hate freedom. With freedom, there is no boundaries. I don't know where to stop. I sometimes go overboard. Chris himself loved freedom so much, he continuously traveled the world. He spent all his money and bankrupted himself. I hate it, I despise it, I loathe it, I detest it. I hate freedom, but I love freedom. I love it, I adore it, I really enjoy it. I love freedom, being free to be who I want to be, being free to do what I want to do. The joy of freedom is wonderful. I love it, I adore it, I really enjoy it. I love freedom. What a wonderful, blessed thing this is. What a wonderful, blessed thing this is. Trappingly trappedness is trappingly trapping. 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 Freeingly freed freedom is freeingly freeing. 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 Freeingly freed trappedness is trappingly free. 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 And there's just what we call 4 parts to the basic 18 that we do. So just relax and let go of the hold and come back to the room whenever you're ready. And that's an excerpt of what we would do in one of the RR frameworks.
Yeah, and it's wonderful.
The idea of it is that when we work with the value conflict, say like freedom versus being trapped, they may hold many bad memories, many bad traumas and experiences for a single person. And so rather than having to go through each one, they can come under a bigger banner. And the bigger banner in this case is the value conflict. And so when we treat, maybe 5 things get treated, maybe 7 or 8, maybe sometimes it's even many times more than that. But what it also does, it treats for the future, because emotionally, we attract what we don't want. What we do want, if we are emotionally needy of it, we push it away. So in reflective repatterning, or RR terms, thoughts and emotions are opposite. Those that like to follow patterns like the laws of attraction or focusing on their dreams and goals, they are more likely to get something the more they think about it. If they put mixed thoughts out, good and bad, they will start attracting good and bad. So the idea is to keep your focus on something good. But if we don't lessen the emotional need of it, we start pushing it away. And those that don't like being trapped in their life will find that they keep reoccurring more and more experiences of being trapped. And this may be because they don't like being trapped, or it may be that more energy is that they love freedom so much that, of course, it generates the charge of being trapped. And then, of course, they're more likely to get that. So the idea is we can work on specifics, on specific traumas directly with RR, but the idea often is to get as much of it done as possible. And so where a round of reflective repatterning would take sort of 20 minutes, half an hour, I've just done sort of 4 parts to a minimum of 18 that I would do. The idea is that we actually get more of the mind-body program. We change more energy than just one specific thing. And then we try and make a better future so they're no longer attracting in those energetics.
Yeah, and what I specifically like, because after you have the kindness to do a discussion with me, and we discussed it for quite a while, I fondly remember that call. It was wild.
I do too.
Yeah. And then you kind of opened my mind to the fact that exploring opposites is very exciting, because the opposite isn't what you think it is logically. Some people say, I'm too stressed. So what do you want? What's the opposite of stress? Some people would say it's calm, but it isn't. Maybe it's joy. Maybe it's curiosity. It could be completely different. It's not a rational logic, so you shouldn't look for it. Now we have a question. Somebody's wondering, would it help for anorectics?
It certainly can do. There are all sorts of triggers for anorexia that go just beyond the psychology. But if we were to keep within the psychological frameworks that RR is, then certainly there are things that can be done with anorexia. We have frameworks in RR to fit many different areas of psychology. And one of them is I created what we call the exaggerator framework. And so if we were to find out the specific issues of someone who was anorexic from their point of view, then we could perhaps use that. So someone may say, they don't like to look big and they want to look thin. Well, what I possibly would do is exaggerate their thinness, but also then exaggerate their bigness with humor. And we tell a type of a story, and it takes people through the threshold of one end and its opposite. So, but we have to find the specific thoughts and feelings that the anorexic person is being triggered by, because they will vary. So certainly it could be applied. Many people with anorexia have a zinc issue where they're not absorbing enough. There are other sort of functional medicine approaches as well. Some are very affected by mercury in the teeth as well, which can also affect the zinc levels. So, but certainly these sort of things can be very supportive.
Yep, and also, it brought to my mind, when you explained it, I've been using it a lot. I use a very compressed format that I add to Havening,
Yes.
which is kind of like a game. So I use the double negation. So I say, if they have something they want to get rid of, like, for example, being trapped, and they would like to have freedom, then the format I use is, I love freedom. I start with a negation. So I start with, I hate being trapped. I hate hating being trapped. I love hating being trapped. I hate loving being trapped. I love loving being trapped. And I switch around to do a U-loop into the positive. So I love freedom. I love loving freedom. I hate loving freedom. I hate hating freedom. And everything is because of Donald Trump. And when you do that, everybody laughs. And when they get the laughter, you get the humor, because it's a surprise. So it's like this, and then you let go.
That is very good. And reflective repatterning. When I start with a client, so in the first 5 minutes, we might be dealing with something very serious. And we still go through the love and the hate, and we have different formats to go through. But as we begin to see the change, observe the change on the person we're working with, or if you're doing it on yourself, then you can start adding in humor. And whether I'm using just havening or I'm using the reflective repatterning or whatever tool, most people will know that I'm working because they hear the laughter in the room. And it's at that point that you're making a serious issue no longer serious, because if they can then laugh, again, that's a powerful opposite. And I commend you there. You're doing that very well with the havening by the sound of it. So well done, you.
Yeah. Well, it's thanks to you. I mean, you really changed my way of regarding opposites, and why it's so useful to instead of focusing on what's your issue, what's your problem, where is it? Because that's a problem-focused, problem-oriented therapy. Instead of focusing on, okay, so you have this issue. What's the map? Where is that on the road from here to here? Yeah. Exaggerate it out so you have that spot so it becomes tiny on a big map. And then you go between these opposites, and there's an NLP technique for that Fredrik teaches, which is doing that with color instead. So you take this image you have and you go into complete white and into complete black and into complete white. And then you go quickly between them. And it's kind of the same thing, but with an image, without words.
Yes. Yeah. It's like a sort of a swish type.
Yeah.
With the RR, there is a kind of swish that goes on, as you say. But I gave an example when I said freeingly free freedom is freeingly freeing. And trappingly trappedness is trappingly trapping. Because each one of those variables, so we were treating freedom and trapped, each one of those has variations of the word. So free, freeingly, freed, freedom, trapped, trapping, trappingly is a made up word. You could do trappingness. And so each one is also going to have a mind-body program, submodalities involved. And what we're doing is we're getting all these links, okay, all of these links at once, and we're changing the energy of it. And then the mind chooses the submodalities that then best fit it. And I call that part the paradox, because the way I originally learned the paradox was that it's something that has a meaning but makes no sense. And I developed RR, but without the paradox. And I was treating a lady for depression. And we'd only made so much progress. And I'd gone through the RR process, so I was scratching my head. And it tested that she needed more RR, yet there wasn't any more RR developed. This was in the first year I developed it, back in early 2007. So I put her on a breathing exercise, and Milton Erickson came into my vision, and he said, "Chris, an RR paradox." I said, "Well, there isn't an RR paradox." And I was having this crazy conversation with Milton Erickson in my mind, and he said, "Make one in RR." So I said, "Well, this is what I think a paradox is." And so as RR is opposite, it's got to start off as a non-paradox and become a paradox. So that's when I started thinking about this lady's depression. There's depressed, depressives, people that are depressive. There's things that are depressing, things that are depressingly perhaps. Depressor, maybe another variant on the word. And I thought all of these things actually make sense to the person, because if they close their eyes and thought about any one of those words, they would have a mind-body program of all the submodalities for it. So if we then change the energy, the mind-body programs for those will change, and therefore then it won't make sense to the unconscious mind. And I sort of said this back to Milton, and he was clapping and laughing, and off he went. And I took this lady off the breathing exercise and just had her in the tap position. I'd never done it before. say depressed, depressive, depression is depressingly depressing. And I kept repeating that. We got to about the 9th or 10th round, and she just burst out laughing. And she couldn't even say what she'd been treated for.
Yeah.
She could not say the word depression afterwards. She couldn't even remember what she was being treated for. And the opposite that I'd already treated, which was either happiness or joy from memory, you know, everything in there got treated as well in one go. And so on my very first teaching of RR on a 5-day course, I was explaining the paradox, and there was a lady I'd invited on who'd had many, many traumas. She just lost her children in a car accident. Her business had gone bust, and she was there to be comforted by therapists, really, rather than to learn. And so somebody was treating her with this, and they came over and said that she feels nothing, which is a true depressed state. And I saw Milton come up again in my top right-hand vision. And he said, just treat nothing. And I thought, well, yeah, okay. So I asked them to do a paradox on nothing, which kind of made them blank. So I went in and just told them to have her in the tap position and say nothingly nothingness is nothingly nothing, nothing nothingness is nothingly nothing. And again, boom, it all cleared. And everything they'd worked for and built up with the RR just suddenly came into place, and everything cleared. So the power of taking variations of the word of the issue and making a sentence that sounds well formed, but it doesn't have to make sense at all. It can be incredibly powerful. It can be, you know, it could be any part of the RR, but it's the thing that really hits home, gets for the Americans, the home run, as it were. And that part was, thank you very much, Milton Erickson, you know, that brought that to my attention. It was something that seemed to happen to me a lot in the early days, whether people were dead or alive. If they were very good in their field of therapy, and I was getting a complicated client, that they would come into my vision and give me a clue, and it always worked. So thank you, Milton, for a major part of RR.
That's beautiful. Yeah, and I also want to add that you showed me this game with words when we had our discussion, and I've been using it constantly. And the word love has a double connotation. In Swedish, love means making love. So I usually, when I do it in English, if I would translate it to English, I would say, you know, I hating being trapped. I love freedom. I hate freedom. It's hard to make love when you're trapped, but you're free to make love, you know. And then people start getting images of making love, connecting that to these words. So it's kind of, you know, conditioning, you know, that weirdness to these words. So when next time you hear the word trap, you're thinking about making love, and it's all weird, which means you've interrupted the old handle to that thought specifically.
Yeah, I mean, from you know, you're doing fantastic work, and I encourage anybody, whatever part of RR they pick up or understand or like, if they do, is to use it, experiment it, create your own with it, and use it with people. Don't be worried that, you know, oh, it's all Chris Milbank stuff. It's not. I created it, but it's for everybody out there to use. You take that into science, into maths, into art, into any effective therapy treatment. You know, I teach body workers to do some things very differently. I'm not a body worker. I have a little bit of background in it. But to apply their body work in an RR way, I created RR movement therapy. So those people that are very stiff and walk like a broomstick, that we teach them to walk around and move and become aware of how they move, and then actually do things in opposite. So if their right leg goes forward and their left arm goes forward, we'll swap it around. And then we'll notice where their eyes move, and we'll get them to move the opposite way. Which way the head tilts, we'll get them moving the opposite way. Move the jaw at different angles, because it makes the legs and the arms go funny. And you can make people almost like walk around in circles if you have them hold the jaw in certain positions. And then you bring it all back to the normal, and they do what is then the normal, and yet it's no longer normal. So, you know, this is very much inspired by my love affair of Moshe Feldenkrais' work, which I studied, you know, for years. But I applied it really in just opposites. And so RR is very much, my experiences have been a hypnotherapist, counseling, psychology, going through the NLP trails, working with Dr. Roger Callahan at Energy Psychology, you know, the thought field therapy, tapping. Many different experiences have come into this. But then I've also had my own experiences of opposites. I was somebody that loved opposites. As a kid, if I was told what to do, I'd do the opposite. And when they expected me to do the opposite, I'd do the opposite of that. And then I'd do the opposite of that, and I'd create different angles of opposites.
I love it.
So, you know, these experiences, when they came into me, they were one day going to do something.
Yeah. And also, you know, what for me, it was a huge realization. For example, I love clean language. I think clean language is fantastic. I don't use it the way it's intended because I'm not completely clean, but it's an attitude that I add into everything I do. And reflective repatterning is one of those fundamental game changers for me that changed my attitude towards everything. I don't know what the opposite is. I don't know if we should go for what we want or what we don't want. When people come and say, I want to quit smoking, I ask, are you smoking enough? How do you know? You know, because they should be thinking it's solving something for them. Maybe it would be better if they smoke 10 packs a day. Yeah. You know, and they have to think that thought. Because also when you ask people for SUD, subjective units of distress, then people usually say, oh, it's an 8. And they want to get it down. But it's hard to get it down. So you ask them, could you get it up to 9? And they go, why would I want that? Just try. So yeah, I can get it up to 9. And that means you can change it one step. Now go one step down and then go another step down, because they realize that they can control it. And I usually explain to people that it's like when you have this bolt that you use a wrench to loosen up, you can't really go there to loosen it up. So you do it in the wrong direction and then you open it. Yes. And that for me is what you've made me realize. So I'm really thankful for that chat. And I hope this comes across for everybody here, because I think what you've come up with, your observation of this and how you apply it is really genius. And it should be added, you know, it's like curry or salt or Tabasco or hot sauce. It should be added to everything.
Well, as I started to develop this, and there's a whole story which has taken long with a series of events that started to happen in my life. But what I realized was that there was generally, part of it in an NLP, but if we go back to the forefathers of psychology, they set a false belief that all the effective therapies followed. And I love Repatterning. It's a superb treatment. I love thoughtful therapy, superb treatment. I love NLP, superb treatment, and so forth. In fact, NLP was one that actually stood out. But when you look at most of EMDR and all sorts, the bulk of these very effective treatments treated mainly one part, NLP being the exception, but the one part was to feel less bad about a bad thing. And that's brilliant. That's really, really important. But NLP then brought in sort of confidence states. So we brought in like 2 parts, and that was great. But what I realized was that, you know, things that we love are as big an issue to clear as things that we hate. So if we really love being with someone, we'll really hate being without them. And we tend to always look for the negative thing to clear, but the positives actually show up the negatives. And when we love a good thing, we take down the excess emotional need for it. Then when we hate it and treat it, we're treating the resistance. And so the basic format is loving and hating the issue within yourself, of others, to others, from others, and then running the paradox. So we've got 9 parts to the issue and 9 parts to the opposite of the issue, which brings up a minimum of 18 parts. But in a RR treatment, we may go as far as 50 parts. And when we compare that to the very effective tools that are still working on 1 or 2 parts, we can see the depth that RR goes into. But I didn't want it to be applied only as RR in the tap hold. I designed RR certain frameworks to be used for those that like the tapping, EFT and TFT. I then started using magnets with RR, because a magnetic field is the opposite of an electrical field, and an emotional problem is it has an electrical field. And when you wipe a magnet over the electrical field, you're pulling out the electrons, and so you're breaking that up and therefore changing the mind-body program and the submodalities. And so, you know, using magnets.
Did you use tuning forks as well?
No, I haven't used it. Okay. We have had a play with one of the RR students with their they actually had tuning forks. Pardon me, and a triangle, a vibrational thing with a triangle and a crystal bowl. And that was interesting, but I don't think specifically tuning forks, although she had some, but I don't think so. And so what I wanted was that there are so many effective therapies out there, and I'm behind anything that works. This is why I stay independent. I want to promote anything that works, and that is helpful for people. But I wanted RR to reach all of those. So I don't want everybody to only use RR. There's no fit all. So how can opposites affect and make TFT and EFT better? How can it make havening better? How can it make bioresonance better? How can it make body work better? Or when I say better, you know, how can you actually grab more of the issue, or, you know, find more stuff to clear? So the idea of RR is that providing you've got an effective treatment, you can use the principles of RR.
Yeah.
But there was also, I realized in my more drinking days, 10 or so years ago, I started to develop inside my head what I call conversational RR. And I used to go and find someone who looked really depressed in a bar. A little bit like some of the Richard Bandler stories, but I went off and used to do this, and get them to become aware of me, and then we'll have a conversation, and inevitably they're, you know, down the pub on their own because they've had a row with their wife or husband or whatever, and to use opposites in a few sentences without making it obvious what you're doing, and the dramatic changes that can come just by giving that flexibility to the brain when they've got a stuck neural thought like, oh, my husband's bad, or my daughters don't love me, or, you know, whatever, or they're mean, or something like that. And you can see the blood go to their face as the dawning of whatever they didn't like, they realize actually there's good in it. And when we don't like something, it's because we love the opposite. And yet that opposite that we like, and, you know, try and be like and use amongst other people, actually lets us down at times. And the realization that comes in. So we have a conversational RR without any treatment holds. We have an incredibly powerful game, which is called Diagnosing and Treating All Self-Sabotage. And I designed this because I used to get a lot of life coaches who had all their goals set, and then they would sabotage it, and then whoever they were working with often would refer them on to me because there was an emotional issue there. So I thought, well, we really need something for life coaching that would really beef up and get the process going. And so I designed a game, and somebody would say, well, this is my goal. If they don't know what their goal is, I treat it as a self-sabotage. Because most people, if they go inside and you ask them what makes their heart sing or makes them smile, they'll have something, but they'll dismiss it because it's too big and they just can't do it, you know. But most people who know the goal, and I would say 95% of people self-sabotage in the first second thinking of what they want in their life. The very first second. Only recently I had somebody who got the 14 seconds, but they admitted afterwards they'd done some RR on the basic frameworks around it first. So that didn't surprise me when I'd heard that. And the idea is that they be 100% comfortable in whatever senses they are aware of, visual, kinesthetic, as in physical or emotional, smell, taste, auditory, and it's all of those senses are going to be 100% supportive, and they're breathing for their goal. And the moment like the internal voice says, I can't do this, or they get a sickly feeling, or they get a bit tight, or their breathing becomes more labored, it's a self-sabotage. They shout self-sabotage. 95% of people self-sabotage in the first second. And then what we do is we break down the sabotage, and they might say, oh yes, I first of all heard my voice say I can't do it, then I got a sickly feeling, and then my breathing became labored. And then we treat those components, and then we have them think about it. I set the timer again, and maybe they get to 10 seconds, and then we clear it. And we keep doing this, and sometimes we go up to a minute, and then it goes back down to 3 seconds again. And all the internal stuff that gets in the way comes up and gets treated. And every one of those things has a valid point that needs to be listened to. Yeah. But we also change the energy so that the unconscious and the body, no longer has to be intense around those thoughts and feelings. It's worked, it's cleared, it's been listened to. And then what happens with some people, and I would say it's about 40% of people, is that they start attracting the external self-sabotage. So during the treatment, they'll get deliveries at the door for the wrong address. One lady I was working with had a 90-year-old neighbor lady drill through her wall. Another time I was teaching this and demonstrating this to somebody that had severe anxiety being up in front of a crowd. And so I actually used him for the demo. And we were up on the second story of a building in October. And a guy comes up on an outside lift of the building with a Christmas hat, playing Christmas songs, banging and waving through the window. And of course, he felt even more vulnerable. But we carried on because it's an external self-sabotage. It's what he's energetically attracting. Because when people get really near to it, if there's some reason that they still fear having the goal, or it might not be good for them, they will go beyond internal self-sabotage to attract external self-sabotage. And anyway, boom, we cleared it. He has an amazing experience after that. I won't go too much in the details, but it can be absolutely wonderful. And we get people to stay for 2 minutes. When they can focus on their goal with all their senses supporting for 2 minutes, you pretty are damn sure they're well on their way to achieving it. I then say to them, if you can get up to 10 minutes, you've already achieved it and it's in the past. So that's how powerful it is. What else about RR? I looked at the belief changes in various different therapies and techniques, and I enjoyed them. I always used to use them. I used to use a lot of the Dilt stuff. But what I wanted was something that could really knock on the door of the most intense belief. Like when someone says, no, that's fact. That's fact. There's no argument. That's fact. And take the energy of that, working in opposites, and create such a neutrality in their mind that the belief changes. And I use a magnet for that one. There is one in the tap hole that I use called the Belief Buster. But there's one I call I agree, I disagree. And why I like this is that I didn't want the therapist or the client to consciously choose what their new belief they would prefer to have. I wanted to change the energy, work in opposites to create neutrality so that a new thing would come up and surface for the person. Sometimes it needs several days for the person to have new experiences to fill in the container of what their beliefs hold. Other times it happens instantly. Sometimes what they think the opposite of the belief is at the beginning of the treatment, it changes. So when we do the belief, then I ask them, is the opposite still the same? Often it's different. So we don't know what it's going to be, but what we do know is it's going to give them a lot more freedom, choice, and flexibility. So it's a way of, I remember in an NLP training I attended, a student attended, and she was practicing, and it was something like 30 years ago. And she told me during an RR training that she didn't know what to work on her belief, to have done when they were practicing. And the guy said, well, let's work on your religion. And anyway, it destroyed her religion. And for nearly 30 years, she didn't know where she was with her religion anymore. And she said it was like 1,000 pieces of glass just shattered. And then what we did, we applied one of the RR beliefs to it. And we just did a little bit and she could experience it. And what happened was her childhood religion, which had been a bit strict and what have you, and then as she got older, her spirituality, they just came in together and they formed something that blended. And she could go to church, but a different church she started to go into, and she could still enjoy her religion, but she could also enjoy her spirituality, and everything came back and made sense. So that's what I wanted. I wanted something that was not going to be manipulative in any way, but it totally gives that person's unconscious mind the choices to make up the new belief, what suits them at the time. And that just happens when we create the neutrality, bringing those opposite north and south poles of the magnet together. Whoosh.
It's wonderful, Chris. We have a question. Can this procedure be used for children with ADD, ADHD, or dyslexia? And I did post an answer there because I wasn't sure we would make it on time. I said, I'm pretty sure your answer will be sure, depending on how they create the ADD, ADHD, or dyslexia. And with the dyslexia, I said that usually there's a skill missing there that you need to install a spelling strategy. So it's not only about the belief, but the way I understand it, you can always use reflective repatterning to bust a belief that is in the way of allowing somebody to explore a skill they don't have. Am I understanding this correctly?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Providing most kids love this. Going slightly off ADD, I love school, I hate school, and things like that. And it becomes really funny. I love doing my homework far more than having ice cream, but I hate that, and they really enjoy the diversity and the fun, and you can make it as fun as you like. But yeah, certainly, providing they will spend enough attention. But I have friends that run a clinic for children. Some of them got autism, physical and mental health issues. And some of them, at the stage where they're banging their heads against the wall and they need to calm down. And I have my friends go around, running around after them, tapping the points on them, and talking in opposites in the language that the child would hear. And they always calm down. And, you know, then we get them on the bench and they do a Bowen therapy, which is like fascia work, and so forth. And that can be very, very effective. In fact, one of the RR students wrote on the Reflective Repatterning Facebook page. She does neurofeedback and works a lot with children. And she wrote a wonderful case where she'd been trying everything and been making some progress, but it'd been fairly limited. And when she'd just finished the RR course and she applied some fun value sets for the child in opposites, while the parent was holding the tap position on the child, and whoosh, transformed, absolutely transformed. So it's always possible. There are biochemical and nutritional factors often involved with ADD and ADHD and so forth, and it just depends what's the biggest drivers, whether you would start off using RR or do some other changes first. But I think there's always a place for it, you know, but it's not going to be a home run that's going to cure the ADD or ADHD, I wouldn't have thought, but it could be something that could be very helpful for sure.
Well, I mean, what it does, it opens the mind to bigger possibilities. I usually say that it's like you have the Duracell rabbit, you know, and it's walking and it comes to a wall and it stands there, you know, and what reflective repatterning does is it gives it a new direction to move in. You know, it's taking away an old direction. So it unsticks you from being totally focused on a symptom, moving into something else. And I think that's always useful. And it also gives you a bigger map because it shows you the opposite. And it also allows you to go from, instead of thinking about what you want to move away from, like the lab profile away goals, you're looking at the toward goals and you're defining them, because it's not obvious that the opposite of trapped is freedom. The opposite of trapped could be having choices, you know, but maybe only 2 because I can't handle 3, you know, so who knows?
Yes. And what we'll often find is somebody brings in an issue. I'll give an example of a lady that had severe anxiety and also severe depression. And I think she was actually more in depression on the day, and that's what I should have been treating, but she was adamant that we work with the anxiety first. Just that depression holds more dark and heavy energy than anxiety because it's the limit of where you go. So I would generally like to clear that out first. But I followed the lady's wishes. It was remarkable. We got her on the Skype that we used at the time in the first place. And I started to treat the depression with the RR, like some of the experience that you heard me demonstrate earlier. And even do the paradox. And she came off very, very angry. It made no bloody difference. I actually had noticed a few variations in observations and so forth, and in a tone of voice, but it barely made any difference. And but I hadn't treated the other half of it. And I said, what's the opposite of depression? I don't know because I've never had it. What could it be? And eventually she settled on joy. And I said, you know, just sort of get her mind working a little bit. When have you ever experienced joy in your life? Never. I said, have you never been for a coffee with friends? I don't have any friends. And it was like this. And she was actually becoming quite abusive with me. And I thought, well, I'm going to carry on here anyway, because, you know, RR is never complete until you covered all the parts. And quite often, the biggest, not always, I mean, it could be 50-50, the biggest emotional resistance can actually be in the positive. And in fact, she was so resistant to joy because she'd never had it, she started to hate joy. And she really, really hated joy. So we got her hating depression. But really, there was a part of her love in depression because it took her away from joy, which she absolutely hated because everybody else had it and she didn't. And so we ran the process through with joy. And first of all, there was a bit of swearing at me while she was in the tap position. And she was calling me all sorts of words that you don't want to use live. I had to carry on and said, well, we might as well do this damn treatment anyway, and then we'll know whether it works or not. And so we carried on with it. And then, you know, there was crying and big emotional releases, and then there was laughter. And she said that was the most joyful thing I've ever experienced. And so I often see this, and it's so missed out that, you know, people say, well, I don't know what to treat next. And I say, well, what do you really love? And they might say, oh, you know, I really love kindness. And I say, what's the opposite of that? And some people might say unkindness. And so what we love is a direct link to what we don't like. And everybody keeps searching for what they don't like, and then they get to the end of it. But if they only thought about what they do like, it exposes what they don't like. And what they don't like exposes what they do like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love that. And you know what? I just want to say, you thought about this. You see, Frederick and I have been thinking about how can we actually show in a way how this is linked, because we've been thinking a lot about it. And we actually made a 3-dimensional model of it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And the thing is this, it's a tetrad. Can you see this?
Yeah.
So you have the body part, which is linked to the mind part. Those are two sides of the actual state that you're in. But then you have what you want, which is what you believe that you want, right? Which is, I want freedom, for example, or I hate being trapped. But at the bottom of the pyramid, the actual driver is what you need, what you actually need. So you might, Frederick had a client that wanted cocaine so he could drink more. Why did he need to drink more? Because if he didn't drink, he had anxiety. What he really needed was to be calm.
Yes. Very good. Very good model. What genius. What genius you guys have. That's quite incredible. Something you mentioned earlier is I love talking to you because I also learn a lot, but the way you understand RR is really good. And you said something that, you know, you like to jump in with the evening, and you're doing some opposites and then say it's all down to Donald Trump and bring in the humor.
Yeah.
And I developed quite a lot in RR. A lot of it we don't even need to use, but I created things for exceptional circumstances where they arise. And anyway, there was all this sort of stuff going on about, you know, faster therapies and faster treatments. And I'm all for quick, but I also like to be thorough. I thought about it, and I thought, well, yeah, you can be quick with TFT and VT, which was sort of, it's a diagnostic version of thought field therapy, diagnosing meridian points. And that can be incredibly quick. And other people were bringing out stuff. And I was looking at it all, and I thought, yeah, you know, you know, they're using a meridian point, or they're using, you know, stuff with the eyes from similar EMDR and, you know, stuff like that. There's havening, that takes a little longer sometimes, not always, very effective. And I thought, hold on a minute, there's got to be another way. And I thought about it, and most people treat their issues seriously. And I'd already been applying lots of humor. I gradually change into more and more humor as I work with people. But I thought, hold on a minute, let's just put all that aside. Let's think differently. Let's think outside of the box. Let's take a serious issue, and then let's see if we can suspend it in time and space with something completely and utterly nonsensical. And then, to give it the oomph, let's use reflex points, because they're not generally used as much, they do in reflexology and so forth, and meridians and fascia at the same time. And so what occurred was something called rapid release. I was immediately yawning, it was gone. Next thing, gone. Next thing, gone. If it took a minute in TFT, it would probably never take any more than 10 seconds with the rapid release. If it took 10 minutes with TFT or havening or whatever, then you'd probably be less than a minute. And so I started experimenting with this, and I had a 4-hour Ryanair flight where I started doing this, and I was realizing that in 10 seconds, often I treated 4 or 5 different things at once. But it was fun. And it's not as deep as the traditional RR, but if somebody comes in with a lot of stuff, and you think, okay, well, let's get, some of the smaller things out of the way, boom, boom, boom. It's a great technique, but it does combine the absolute seriousness with something that makes no sense and is completely daft. And it works wonderfully. So I can, just you raising that point, I'm glad that you discovered your own way of doing that, and taking that into havening is very, very good. Havening is a fantastic tool. But when people can be creative with it can actually do a lot more than a lot of people think, and you're leading the way thereof.
Yeah, but the thing is all these tools are great, but they're like hammers. You can use a hammer for a lot of stuff, but you need to find out, where am I supposed to hit with it, and how hard and when. And reflective gives you that, because havening and tapping, I mean, I use trauma tapping a lot. Gunilla is here. We have this modality called trauma tapping technique without talking at all, which is used in cross-cultural groups and everything, and cross-language barriers. And the thing is, havening and tapping and TAT, and we know tapas as well, Fleming. So I mean, they're all wonderful ways of calming down the nervous system. But to know where to hit with a hammer, you need other techniques like clean language or reflective that show you where it is. Where is that place where I need to use this thing? And that's why it's such a genius thing to work with both at the same time, because when you're combining TAT with RR, you're working body to mind and mind to body, because you're going both directions. And that's the whole thing. That's the principle. And I love it.
Yeah. When we're talking about the tap, something I wanted to say, going back to Tapas Fleming, when I realized how effective the tap hold would be, and how I could start using this with opposites, I contacted her and said what I was doing. I said, look, Tapas, I love your tap hold, and I love your tap 9 steps and various other things that you've done. This is what I've been doing with it. And I had 3 telephone calls with her on one day. She loved it. And she gave me her blessing to use a tap hold with RR. Just in case someone's, thinking down there that, I stole the tap hold or anything like that. No way. Tapas Fleming, what she created there is genius. And her, I teach a lot of different muscle tests. Do you know Tapas Fleming's muscle test?
No, show it.
It's the most fantastic. So you can do this when you're just in conversation with somebody. You can do it when you're treating, maybe your hands are involved if you're havening or whatever. Well, what happens? Where's your favorite holiday, Ulf? Where would your favorite holiday be?
One favorite holiday would be the Philippines.
Okay. So would you like 10 grand spending money and 3 weeks paid for in the Philippines?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Now, some of the viewers may have noticed what Ulf just did, but I've got a pile of dog dirt here. Would you like to inhale it?
Most probably not.
No,
but I'm not
okay.
sure yet.
Okay. What happens is, when somebody wants yes, their head, even if they don't notice it much, will at least do a micro muscle movement in the nodding. And when they don't want something, just as you did, you went no before and then making a joke where you did not. So what we got is a natural process. In some cultures, it's going to be different, of course, and then you can use the variables of the different cultures. But in a lot of most of the Western cultures, a nod of the head is yes, and a shaking of the head is no. And so, you know, I could be asking myself, should I carry on with this treatment? And I find my head nodding, and that means carry on. And if I ask, you know, maybe should I carry on, and I get a movement horizontal, it's going to mean a no. And so that is her muscle test, and I think it's the most genius of them all in many ways. It's not the one I applied during the RR. I swing my arms about to give me rhythm, and I can get variations on a test to see how much has been done and how far it's got to go. But as a simple one, Tapas-Fleming's muscle test, if I'm doing body work and I only do limited body work, you know, should I carry on with this move? And you know, I don't have to take my hands off and do a muscle test. My head's going to tell me. And so thank you again, Tapas-Fleming. What a genius and beautiful person. She is.
Absolutely. Yeah. Gunilla knows her well, and I know her too. Could you just tell me, Jack is asking, could we get an example or a demonstration of rapid release?
Yeah, I'm kind of happy to do that. It's such an easy thing. Does Jack have, maybe because I'm talking to you, what I want you to do, Ulf, is just to think of something that bothers you. Let's not take the biggest thing just for time and that, but take something that bothers you a little.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Easy. Okay. Can you just tell us what it is? Or
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I think people are way too greedy, and the earth is gonna, you know, it's gonna dissolve because people are too greedy.
Okay.
That really bugs me.
Okay. All right. Now, where does it bug you? If you could point to where you're experiencing the bugging feeling in yourself.
Yeah, I would say around here.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you just breathe through it as well to try and calm that down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, for this, you might have to take your headphones back a little bit.
Okay.
Because we're going to access. Okay. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you, not now, in a moment, I'm going to ask you to take thumb and index finger on both ear. Mm-hmm. And what you're going to do is slightly pinch and massage both sides of the ear. You start off with the earlobes, because of a lot of people, that's the area, but it can be anywhere. You can make your way round in all the little grooves of the ear, the inner ear part. In there's 130 acupuncture points. There's reflex points for the entire head and body. There are points in there for anxiety, for calmness. And we also, as we're moving the ear, we're moving the fascia on the ear, which doesn't get a lot of attention. So that can be tighter than in other areas of the body. And of course, we're going left and right ear is left and right brain. So we're getting a nervous system. We're getting just relax your ears for the moment. Now, we're working on 130 acupuncture points per ear. We're working on the reflexes, like you get in hand reflexology, foot reflexology. There's auricular. You can study Paul Nogier's work. He used frequencies of lights in the ear, and I was very fascinated by that. So this was another reason I started to go for the ear. But I also noticed nervous people, you ask them a question and they often fiddle with their ear as they begin to think about it, or when they're sat on a plane, you know, they do all this, and we use that in the havening. So I wanted something different. And so I thought about the ears. So what would your SUD be on feeling bugged about greediness? What would it roughly be, Ulf?
My SUD, well, I would say 8.
8. Okay. So I'm going to run through. I'll give you about a minute in there. If it's changed before then come out. A lot of people don't realize it's changed. Most people come out of it.
Well, it's shifted already a little bit. I mean, after we do this, so it
right, yeah, it's likely to. But most people carry on a lot longer than they need to in it
Mm-hmm.
because it's already gone, because it's happened that quickly. So anyway, just close your eyes, start rubbing your ears, and I want you to focus on greediness and feeling bugged by it. Rub round your ears and listen to these words. Pineapples are blue in Hawaii because it snows on the equator. Pineapples are blue in Hawaii because it snows on the equator. Pineapples are blue in Hawaii because it snows on the equator. Pineapples are blue in Hawaii because it snows on the equator. I can carry on saying it, or you can repeat it in your own mind, whichever you prefer.
Yeah, it's already shifted.
Yeah, okay. So that only took, I don't know, I mean, you know, I was trying to demonstrate it and explain. And, you know, what did that take? 15 seconds, something like that, all told?
Yeah. It's wonderful. Yeah, it's elegant.
Yeah. Now, what I would say is a warning, because it is so rapid, you can get so many things treated at once and you can feel brain fried for 3 or 4 days. So I tell people, don't do any more than 20 minutes. Now, a lot of people ignore me, and then they, because it changes so many experiences so quickly, the problem being is that they then got to adjust to all their new ways of thinking and feeling. So it's something I never take lightly, this one. I did fry my brain when I did it for 4 hours, and believe you me, I didn't know where it was. And in the early days when I had the RR students experiment with it, they were saying how fantastic. I mean, one lady treated everything in a second on herself, in less than a second. It was a massive yawn and it was gone, and it was gone. But we did get a few cases where people had overdone it. So we want to be a bit careful with it. Now, as long as the sentence sounds well formed, do you know what manhole covers are in Sweden and Norway? You know, the big metal drain covers in the streets. Yep. We call them manhole covers. Or maybe you like the name drain hole covers. So another one would be, you know, you're rubbing this, you're thinking of the serious issue. Drain hole covers make the best underwear, you know, and so as long as you're coming out with something that creates a what the in the brain is like, what did he just say? And is completely daft, then we're mixing something serious and completely daft, and we're using this treatment to mash it together, and we create that neutrality, something very serious versus something that is so unserious, so nonsensical, so stupid that they cannot coexist as they did before. And that's part of the reason why it's so quick and effective.
It's wonderful. And I mean, my brain starts going theories about what is it that actually works. Well, you're doing a lot of body input. You're doing input in the whole body because of all the acupuncture points. You're also doing left-right brain, but you're also starting a transderivational search because the brain is going to be trying to make sense of that sentence, which means you're also inducing a flow state because the brain will use all of its capacity to find out, should I take this seriously or not, which means that you are completely not stepping in the old auto patterns of thinking.
Yeah, you're creating a new neural pathway. And,
exactly.
You know, the mind will, as you well know with NLP, that it would rather choose the easier, more fun route than the stressed and whatever route. So, yeah, it's a lot of things at once. And the reflex points are incredibly powerful because you're getting the whole body involved. You're getting the whole body involved in the electrical circuitry of the reflexes in the nervous system, but also the acupuncture points, the meridians, which feed all the organs and so forth and go through the chakras. So there's a lot of change, but you're also getting fascia movement because you are massaging the ears. Now, the hands get a lot of fascia stuff because we're doing stuff with them all, each and every time. The feet, because we're walking on them, they've got a lot of, but up here, that's where a lot of the fascia needs doing because we don't do so much with the ears, only when we're stressed. And so when we actually apply it to a stress, then it's going to work at its best. So yeah, it works on, I mean, I don't know how many levels it works on. I'm not a scientist that's going to come out with theories here. Roger Callahan once said to me, I love my theories and I think they're right, but one day somebody will prove them wrong, and then another generation later they'll probably prove them right again. Who knows? So I don't go so big on the theory. I can give my theory as an example, but I'm probably wrong. But either way, it works.
Yeah.
I'd like to be proven wrong, because then I'd learn something else.
I feel this. I feel the exact same way.
Yeah. It's a good way of learning. If you find a client and it's difficult to work with, I used to always run out and jump up and down and go Yahoo in the front garden, because now I had an opportunity to find something, talk to everybody, and find a way that will work. So I like a challenge.
Yeah, exactly. So we have a question from Camilla. Do you end with something positive?
Generally, yes, but it will vary, because I do energetic testing. But the idea is, supposing that somebody has a negative issue, and say it was dishonesty. Quite often I will start off with, I hate dishonesty, and tone that down a bit before I love dishonesty. And then we'll go into the opposite, and if that is honesty, we will do the same. We might start off with, I love honesty, because there's going to be less resistance there, and then we'll start treating hate honesty, where there is going to be resistance. So I'm mindful in the order that we do it in. But in the end, I think it's really important for the person to make up their own mind. So if I always aim to go on a positive, that might not be the person's experience. My experience is to give them more neutrality, and what they are happy with. They may be at one end of the polarity and enjoy that new space. They may be in the other end. They may be in the middle. And so I carry on until the person feels most comfortable with it. And really, if it's been thoroughly treated, they should be okay about the negative, and they should be feel the same about the positive.
Yeah, I mean, you're giving them a bigger map.
Yeah. But I mean, if there's a specific example that Jackie would like to, ask on there, fine. But
this was Camilla.
Camilla, pardon me. Sorry, Camilla.
No, she's cool with it. It was good. So yeah, I'd like to hear. I mean, we want to have a little Q&A at the end, but I'm also quite curious, because you did use RR also to cure yourself, and that's very interesting. Is that something you feel comfy talking about?
Yeah, sure. In 28th of February 2016. I was teaching a 2-day course in London with magnets, funny enough, and using opposites and that kind of thing. And something I learned from John Grinder, and I've always used ever since. There's a lot that I've used. John Grinder really was somebody that turned my therapeutic world upside down. And I was amazed by him. But I remember him setting unconsciously for when he had the flu to get through that particular training, and he didn't know what he taught that day. And I had an experience like that before. And I'd felt a few days early like there was a cold coming on, and I did a big dose of vitamin C. And I said to myself that morning, I was going into London to teach, if I'm going to go ill, then wait until the end of the training. And I sort of set that in motion. So thank you, John Grinder, because I've never dropped out of a training ever yet, and I don't intend to. And the training finished at 5 o'clock, but at 4:30, I started the feeling it coming on, and I thought, okay, well, this is an excuse for me, rather than sit around for a few hours afterwards and chat with people, to, you know, tie it in, and I will get back on the train and where I'm staying in London as soon as I could. And so 5 o'clock came, and there was a few people to talk to, and I did it as quickly as I could, and I started to move on. And I could only make part of the journey back on the train, so I stopped off at a friend's. And I'd always been the most independent person you ever come across. And but anyway, they demanded that I took a lift back to where I was staying. So I did, and for the next 3 days I didn't eat a thing, and I've never ever had done that in my life. However ill I am, I could always eat. So eating was enormous, and I just couldn't, and I was so exhausted. And a couple of days later, feeling just a tad better, flew back home to the Canary Islands, where I've lived for the last 13 years. And I got more and more ill. And I don't like the doctors, but there wasn't a lot of alternative stuff on there. And over the next few months, I was down to about a quarter of my body weight. I couldn't walk, and some friends came round and saw where I was, and they had to hold me up. I didn't even have the strength to peel a soft tangerine or lift a tea towel. So we didn't know what it was, and the doctor, I did go to a medical doctor, and they diagnosed me with Salmonella typhi, which is serious enough as it is, but there was probably more going on. I started on the thing called chlorine dioxide, which is a very controversial thing, but it's completely safe. I've used it many times, because a friend I'd helped 10, 12 years early with back pain and cancer. I introduced her to this chlorine dioxide, or known as MMS, and she happened to have some. Otherwise you wouldn't get it on the island. So I started treating with that, and got to myself to the UK 10 days later, but in a very weak state. Took the disability from the plane. I had to walk 5 steps to the car, collapsed, and sick. Anyway, I was diagnosed as HIV and AIDS, and so many other bacterial and mycoplasma infections. And I was in a very ill state. Now, if it wasn't for RR, I don't think I would have even got myself there. But I used RR to even leave my island. There was big parts of me thought that I would never be back there again. In fact, everybody in the island knew I wouldn't be back again. And so that was very powerful. But there were so many times where I'd be trying to be sick all day. I couldn't stand up. I looked 100+ years old. I was weaker than I'd ever seen. I remember looking myself in the mirror and just breaking down and crying, but I couldn't lift myself off the bathroom floor when I collapsed. And RR has principles, and part of the principles are, from all bad comes good. And so during a really bad period, you must know that that magnet is pulling in something good. And so the principles of RR really honed in here. And I knew something good would come from it. In fact, when I actually had, I mean, I'd been sick for many months before I had the diagnosis. I'm not great with doctors. I didn't do anything pharmaceutical at all. I treated and got rid of my AIDS all naturally. I still have HIV, the so-called virus, and that's another controversial thing. I don't think it is a virus. But it was also the relentless resolve, reflective repatterning, because there were times when I just wanted to wave the white flag. I didn't want to be taken to a hospital. I wanted to be taken straight to the mortuary, right? Because I didn't want hospital intervention. I didn't want the drugs and everything else they'd like to give you. And you got to balance that with relentless resolve and create that neutrality. And it was that relentless resolve to get better, to stay in my bed with frequency generators called Rife machines, passing out every minute, waking up, still being, into the charge, and then collapsing again and waking up, and trying to do something like that for 6 hours a day when you didn't even have the energy to open your eyes. It's called Relentless Resolve. And I was able to get more towards Relentless Resolve by, balancing that against huge polarity that was sucking me in of just wanting to give up. So that was enormous. And too many people die through not trying hard enough, either within a medical system, which I don't really believe in, but people do, or an alternative health system. They give up. And, sometimes giving up is a lot less painful than striving on. But if you can work and neutralize that painfulness, and making an experience, and then in your principles say, look, this is going to be something that's going to be really important, because if I get through this, I can encourage people around the world, which I now do. I spend so many hours every day writing to people and chatting to people live on Zoom and Skype and so forth, who've had HIV or AIDS and what they can do. RR got me to that point. RR made me smile when I got the diagnosis and say, well, this is a challenge. And a friend of mine that was with me, and he got the diagnosis, I said, I'm going to put this on Facebook now and tell the world. He goes, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Give yourself some time. Think about it. I said, no, if I think about it, if I tell everybody I'm going to do it, then when I want to wave the white flag, I'm going to see all those people in my mind that are on Facebook that I promised to get well, and I'm going to have let them all down. And so that became the massive motivator and driver for me to get well. And in my weakest times, I saw those faces, and a lot of people would say, if anyone can do it, Chris Milbank can. And I thought, if I don't do this and I fail and I die, I will let them all down. So I fought harder. It helped the Relentless Resolve. The pain of giving up then became more than it was to carry on, and the reverse switched. So the RR principles was so important. If you haven't got the mindset to do it, then it's going to be very hard to achieve it. So RR, you can say, was a driving factor of getting myself well again.
Did you do specific RR exercises on a daily basis, like going to the opposites of I want to get well, I want to die?
No. Funny enough, because one, I had treated a lot of stuff with RR, so there wasn't nearly as many things to thoroughly clear as in with some people. I mean, I came with my issues. I used to have terrible anxiety, paranoia, OCD, you name it. They're all out of the window. But the giving up versus the relentless resolve was something that I applied, because it was something I was currently really, really feeling. I'd created more neutrality around different treatments and things, and other times before I was ill. But that was the main thing in the treatment. But I would say it was the RR principles. From all bad comes good. So when you're in a bad time, you focus to the good that's going to come, even if you don't know what it is, because that magnet is there and it will pull it in. It always pulls it in. You can't have a North Pole without a South Pole. But then in the good times, you don't want to think about what the magnet is going to bring in on the bad. You want to stay present and enjoy the good times. So, even experiencing those opposites, you tend to apply them in opposites. So during a good time, stay present. During a bad time, know that it's pulling in a good future.
Yeah. So what would your advice be if you, because I don't know about you, of the rest of the people here, but I have a lot of clients that are facing a possibly terminal illness. And I use a lot of Judith Simon Prager's work in her book, The Worst Is Over, which is verbal first aid, which I think is really, really good for that. But I also find that clearing the space, when you get a terminal disease, there's a lot of things involved. You feel bad conscience for all the people who are sorry for you, because you see sorrow in their eyes when they look at you. So you suddenly you feel shame that you're ill because people who love you look sad, and it's your fault because you're not getting well. So there's all these opposites in there. So just clearing that up, you know, clearing up shame about not being good enough, shame about being sick, wanting to be alive, fear of death, fear of losing somebody, clearing this, and not only with a person, but also with their family, creates a neutrality, which gives a safe space for them to hold, to see where they go with this. Because regardless of what happens, they need to make a beautiful part of the voyage, regardless of the outcome, because you don't know the outcome, and you don't want to instill false hopes. So what you want to do is you just want to give them the possibility of holding a flower that is whatever it is during that part. So I do use reflective repatterning there, but kind of carefully, not that much humor always, but there's always space for humor. But I mean, it's about hating to have cancer. It's about hating to have cancer and loving to have cancer. You know, it is about that.
We also got to look at the beliefs around the diagnosis. John Grinder told a wonderful story once how a lady says, "Oh, you won't be able to help me. I've got a very rare and unusual cancer." And he replied, "Well, I have a very rare and unusual treatment." And you know, wonderful, wonderful. So with I certainly look at the beliefs. I also look at all the symptoms of the illness, because as you deal with the stress that's linked to there, that will quite often link to the emotional triggers of why the person got ill in the first place.
Exactly.
Now, I'm not saying that they're the only triggers. There's often toxicity involved and parasitology and you know, infections and nutritional imbalances and things to address. But you're pretty much always find that there's an emotional aspect to the illness, and you can get that mopped up in once. And if you can change the belief system to something negative, oh, you know, the only thing that can be done is chemo and there's only a 40% chance. Well, I'm sorry, but then if there's only 40%, then there's 60% of that person is actually thinking, well, you know, this is it. And you can't have that imbalance if you want to get well. So creating the neutrality with the belief changes is incredibly powerful. I also developed something that had already been developed, which is, I didn't know at the time. I developed brain stare, but there was originally brain spotting before that. It's a very similar thing. I have variations on it. But what I do is with brain stare or brain spotting, you focus your eyes in one position that you can focus or feel the issue the most intense, and then you hold them there. And that will be the spot in the brain where most of the stress is held for the issue. And you hold it and hold it and hold it. You could be in there for 10 minutes before anything happens. The treatment could take an hour and a half. It could be done in 5 minutes. But you then focus on the health issues, and everything that brain holds on the health issues and all the symptoms and the pain or the illness or the sickness, whatever you've gone through, it all gets cleared. And that is also then linked to the emotional causes. So if you don't know what they are, you can do a brain stare with it. And then, of course, I work in opposites. So I would then do the brain stare or the brain spotting for the opposite of actually being, you know, if the person's opposite is being super well and happy, or whatever their opposite is. And we focus on that, and we find, again, the best position where the brain will, you know, hold the most resistance to that and clear it and push. You know, that can be incredibly powerful.
I'm not sure I understood. What do you mean, how you find the best position?
You move your eyes around slowly
got it.
To the point where you can either focus or feel or, you know, the issue. And I use that quite a lot when I go off and do saunas and sit in a jacuzzi, you know, on some days. And I often just do the brain stare in the jacuzzi and just see what comes up, you know. I focus on a little spot on the wall, or where I go, there's tiny little tiles, and I find a tile and just put, you know.
And also, two people just want to say, I just want to tell you in case you don't see it. So Melina is saying, thank you, Chris, for sharing your healing AIDS story with lots of hearts and thank yous and namaste and high fives. And from Camilla, so lovely and generous of you. And I think everybody feels that way.
Thank you.
If they hadn't been muted, you know, out of, says John D. White. So if they hadn't been muted just for the sake of us keeping noise down, people would be doing that. And I can shift the view shortly. I don't know if you have a gallery view or if you see yourself. Can you see everybody here or a lot of people?
No, I can't. I tell you why. Hold on a minute. Let's just maximize this up.
Well, at the top of the screen.
Oh, crumbs, there's a chat, 41 messages. I'm so sorry.
Don't worry. I've been telling them.
Sorry, everybody. I can see your pictures now.
Yeah, there you go. So we're all waving. So I was thinking we could do a little bit of Q&A here.
Yes.
If somebody, I mean, I'm sure people have questions. We still have roughly 15 minutes. So don't be polite. Unmute your mic and start talking, because it's the only way with this many people that we're going to make something happen. So please, if you have a question for Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, quite a few of you got your mics muted, I see.
Hi, this is Lynn.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi, really nice to meet you. When you were speaking of relentless resolve, I have to say that I think I was born with that.
Fantastic.
Because I've always had the belief that after you've gone through something big, there is something good on its way, and it's never let me down. It's always true.
Well, do you know what? Why I came up with the term relentless resolve, I knew that I wanted to give up. Our words had always been very special for me. My mum that died when when I was 3, was called Rini. Big breakthrough was Richard Bandler, and then John Grinder, and these R's. Rife machines, Royal Raymond Rife. And so I learned a lot of frequency stuff, and it just kept going through. And then of course I created Reflective Repatterning, RR. And when I had to look for what was the opposite of wanting to wave the right flag, and RR came in, and I thought, well, it's not Reflective Repatterning. And I went, and my mind said relentless resolve. And so that's how it came through. R's have been special, and I've purchased, I've done trainings, I've studied things, or I've gone with things with the symbol of R's in my life. But fantastic that you've got something, like that. But sometimes, maybe it needs toning down at times. I don't know. Is it always useful, or is it sometimes you wish you could put the handbrake on a little?
Oh, it's always useful. And I usually have I lost my son the 1st of December. And but I know haven't been able to have that focus has allowed me to create all kinds of possibilities since then that didn't exist before that. Because I just know that, well, energy shifts, things change, and I remember working with a counselor back probably 20 years ago, and him saying to me, Lynn, your life is a paradox. You've experienced the best of the best and the worst of the worst. So I always know that, yes, those possibilities are all there.
Yeah. It's great to have guiding principles that we can rely on, and know that will come into play. None of us, doesn't matter what skills we have, are going to avoid really bad things happening, in our lives and affecting us. But if we can find a way of drawing on that may help others, or that will give us new experiences, or make some positive changes. Sometimes we do lose someone, and sometimes they haven't been looking after themselves, and that can be a kick for us to look after ourselves, or, you know, in whichever way. But there'll always be something positive, however tiny that is to the bad. Sometimes it is that needle in the haystack, but if you can focus on that needle head and focus on the good, it will start becoming bigger and bigger and filter and create more flexibility in the mind to find the good as well. So yeah, incredible. I love that you've naturally got that. I had to fight for it.
And in my map is, because of that, my map is possibilities, is it's expanded, and it does every time.
Yes, yes. And I can see a rainbow on your wall.
There's far, like, the possibilities that exist out there for me are far greater than I could ever imagine. And so to think that I have to imagine something for it to come to me is a joke.
Right.
because my mind is only, you know, it's only this big, but the possibilities are endless. Yeah,
it's infinite. I didn't realize how restricted my mind was until I started applying RR. Now, and we're all at different levels. I mean, when I started RR in 2007, I'd been a therapist for many years in a number of different fields, and started leading the way with thought field therapy, working alongside Roger Callahan. But I just didn't realize how restricted I was. I knew I had my anxieties, I knew I had my paranoias, I knew I had my OCD, and that's, you know, drive me through there. And I had serious health problems even before I got AIDS. They didn't expect me to live. So there was a lot of stuff that I'd been carrying. But I was shocked that when you take the opposites, how much your universe can expand, or your perception of it, you know, what you can receive. That was a real eye-opener for me. I didn't realize how much I was restricting myself.
Yeah. I have a few more questions here. Is that okay, Lynn?
Absolutely.
Chris, yeah. Good to see you, Lynn. So, two things here. A short question is, thank you for introducing this process. Very cool. Love it. How can we learn more? Do you offer online training? You don't have to answer this now, because you can just send me all your contact info and the trainings you do, and I will send it out to everybody who's here, okay? So we'll save some time on that, if that's okay.
Sure.
Because I think that way you will find the links and everything, because the chat disappears when we close down. So second question is from John DeWitis. So for instance, someone with debilitating chronic Lyme, ready to wave a white flag, what is opposite for them? Would that be hope? And then do the RR process with that?
What I would say is, I, as a therapist, shouldn't be choosing the opposite. So if that person that's waving the white flag, that's one end, I would say to them, what would be the opposite of that? What is it that you would like to have instead? What would be the thing that would bring the smile back to your face? And some people might say, well, it's getting well. Some people might say it's the relentless resolve I suggested. Other people might just say is, you know, I just want to making a breakthrough of any sort. And whatever their opposite is, that's what we treat. We treat it and the opposite. And then from there, we can expand it out from there and from there and from there. And, you know, Lyme's disease is debilitating. Some people, it's mercury that mimics Lyme, but most people, it's a combination of things. And when I look at the work of Dr. Lee Cowden and Professor Dietrich Klinghardt, they have some fantastic protocols and they're helping so many people. So there is definitely hope out there. Applying some of the protocols can be expensive, and then, but then, you know, you can use RR in there. And I always say, well, make a step of what you can afford to do. And then, you know, if it's another 6 months later, do the next step. But you'll get there. And the more energy you get, if you get a 10% raise in energy, then there's 10% more that you can do towards it. So I found that every single bit of energy I needed every day to get well, I put back into my treatments, and that was Relentless Resolve. But it depends what, you know, your opposites are. Another thing I would do, and it's a very well-known thing, that laughter. So when I was feeling the most down in my life, I would put on the British comedian Tommy Cooper, and I would laugh and laugh. And I remember one day I laughed, and I was on the side of my bed trying to look at my laptop. I was in so much pain, so sick, so exhausted, and so down. And I watched Tommy Cooper because I knew I had to change my state of mind again. And I laughed and I laughed, and I fell on the floor, and I was screaming in pain. But more than I was screaming, I was laughing. A friend of mine where I was staying, you know, came up and said, "You're right." And I said, "I'm in pain, but it's so funny." And I just couldn't stop laughing, and they couldn't stop laughing. And of course, you change their energy, that changes your energy. And I got help back into bed, and I was able to carry on. So sometimes just changing the state, you know, if there's something that really makes you laugh, do it. Laughter is fantastic. So you just got to find the opposites to how you emotionally feel, what your thinking are, your beliefs. And I know it's a lot of hard work, but believe you me, staying ill is harder work than the short-term challenge of doing these positive things when you feel negative. Doing those is actually easier in the long run than you know, suffering for a long time. But it's hard. It really is hard. But if it wasn't hard, then I wouldn't have had that experience to be able to talk about it today. So, you know, from all bad comes good, and you just got to know that. You just got to know it.
So this is Lori. Doesn't it really just come down to a really deep spiritual belief that this universe is a benevolent place and everything is really here to help you, no matter what it is, and that all the work that we're doing right now is grounding us deeply, deeply in a spiritual world right now that's changing the universe. We're changing.
I mean, it can be. I mean, I remember as I was developing RR in the early days, there was a Chinese Buddhist community in London, and they're saying, what you're treating and achieving is what we are aiming for in Buddhism. And I said, well, funny enough, I don't know anything really about Buddhism at all, but if there was one religion that made sense to me, then it would be Buddhism. So I went and did a talk, and it was really, really interesting, because as I started to understand the laws of Buddhism, I realized that there was, what I was doing in RR was a lot of those principles, but treating them to get to those principles of neutrality and so forth. The universe does seem to give us these experiences. I don't know beyond that. I'm not a spiritual guru as such in that way. But I certainly, you know, if there's anything in there that helps you, then use it, because, you know, we all need help in these dark times, when we have the dark times. And certainly the RR principles help me. But, you know, others, it's their faith in their religion or their spirituality that pulls them through. But certainly, if you're only going to believe what the diagnosis is, and the medical doctor, and this is there's nothing we can do, or we can only manage the symptoms, you want to change those beliefs.
Yes.
Ultimately, John Grinder really woke me up with another story about a lady that was recommended to him who had terrible cancer. And John Grinder said to her, "What would it take for you to get over this?" And she said, "My world would have to turn upside down." And indirectly, John had given some unfair prices for the treatment, I think the story went, and sort of scared her into doing it. And she happened to be previously a journalist before she got ill. And so John said, well, look, I'll swap you because I'm flying to Europe, and I'm actually going off to view a plane to buy. Would you go and look at it for me? And of course it was a friend of his, and she took down all the notes and asked how many miles to the gallon or whatever they do on planes. And she went to go off, and the guy that had the plane said, hold on a minute, you don't buy a plane until you've test driven it, so you're going to come for a ride. And of course he took her up in the air and flew her upside down, so her world turned upside down, and she had a remission just like the other lady. So beliefs are incredibly powerful. I've known people, I worked with somebody being, a whole village that had been affected by voodoo in Mauritius. I worked with a guy that had his life threatened and his home burnt down because he was on the wrong side of his witch doctor in Papua New Guinea. I met him in Tanzania. And these beliefs completely ran these people's lives. Now, I'm not saying that the witch doctor didn't do magic or the voodoo didn't do magic. It probably did. But when we work with the belief, it undoes all that energy. And these people had transformed lives. The whole village was transformed just by working on one person with the voodoo spell. It broke the whole lot. And there'd been a lot of suffering for many years.
Voodoo is a belief. And
so beliefs are incredibly powerful. And it was John Grinder really that opened my eyes to how powerful they were back in those earlier days. So, again, I thank, NLP and those insights. RR is developed from a lot of things. It's an energy psychology. It's using TAP. It's working in opposites. Opposites came a little bit from NLP for me, but also my mentor. My own experiences in my life. I apply the mind-body programs with the submodalities. So there's a lot of things that it's stemmed from. And, all these things that work really well, RR is kind of bringing them together.
In a beautiful way. And I think you just brought this whole seminar together, Chris. Yeah, right on the minute. So yeah, big hand for you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you for listening. I can talk. And some wonderful questions and lovely listeners. So thank you very much, Ulf. And say hi to Frederick as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry I got in a muddle with the link earlier.
You are a fantastic person. I really appreciate you as a being on this planet. You cheer me up a lot. I think you're fantastic. We love you. At least I do. And if we by chance would like to hear more or would like to see you again in this way, would that be possible?
Yes, of course.
Okay, wonderful. And you will send us material. You will send me materials about links to your sites and trainings and everything, and we'll send them out to people. And people are saying, yes, we love you, Chris. Gunilla's telling you that. So yeah, lots of love coming your way. So let's just say thanks so much. And we're going to be sharing this recording, and I hope that's okay with everybody, because we want to spread this stuff. The motto of this year for the Peaceful Heart Network, which is me and Gunilla and Frederick and Jack and other people here, is that we want to share knowledge so that the world actually becomes a better place. And it's completely selfish. We have kids and we want them to inherit a good world. So let's just do this.
Great reason why selfishness is a good thing.
Exactly. So take care, everybody. Let's give it a wave. Yep. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Much love.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.